Jay, welcome back to Timely Conversations.
Thank you. Good to be back. Yeah, second time around.
We're talking about something that's so close to your heart this time around, a
Mm.
startup that you've, embarked on.
Yep.
Can you let the audience know?
Absolutely. Look, firstly, been in the startup space for a while. Built a couple of consumer products, marketplaces, put them out to the market. Got to revenue. Learned a lot about product development, digital product development, and I took a little bit of a break to focus on corporate career. My corporate background is risk and compliance. But since then, I've got the itch again and decided to come back and create software that I know a lot about. It's compliance management overall. It's called RiskSafe. And really, when you think about it, no one can escape compliance, right? If you're running a business, it's very, very hard to work in an industry that's not regulated. If you're in financial services, if you're in health, if you're in energy, if you're in construction, for example, large industries, always heavy regulation. So I decided to go out and help business owners that are running companies in that space to easily understand their compliance and regulatory requirements, and then easily be able to map them and make sure they're adhering to those requirements in very easy to use software called RiskSafe. So that's what I'm up to at the moment, keeping myself busy and out of trouble.
Wow. How did the funding come about?
Funding, look, firstly, if you speak to a lot of startup founders, initially there is no funding, right? Because you're starting something as a kernel of an idea in your own head. And then you move to doing customer interviews and validating that idea with the MVP. You would have heard the term, minimal viable product. And then from that point onwards, you want to build out that product further and then really get some customers on board to even consider funding. I'm quite conservative when it comes to that. And first point is, do not go raise funding if you don't have a product that's validated in the market itself. If you do have some confidence in the market, you've identified your unique customers, you've identified some kind of a marketing approach to get to those unique customers, then it is the time to go and speak to angel investors and potentially very early stage investors as well. So it's a journey, and you've got to understand what the investors are looking for as well. So it's an art in itself.
I know you mentioned you've invested before. So from an investing perspective, how do you choose the startups to invest?
Yeah. I think number one, a lot of investors will look for is domain expertise. So is this guy building a company that he knows about? If I'm, say for example, if I'm in banking but I'm trying to build a product in healthcare, then certainly the investors will be like, hang on, what's this guy talking about? Does he have the domain expertise to build something in that industry or not? Secondly, the team. If you're specifically in technology, then do you have inside technology skills, development skills overall? That has to be a tick. Do you have a product in the market? How's the market responding to it? Do you have some initial sales? Do you have some kind of a semblance of a growth plan? Are you international from day one, or is it very hyper-local type product? So these are types of questions that they'll go through to do their own due diligence before they even consider investing in you. So you have to think about what's in it for them as well, right? At the end of the day, investors, especially technology early stage investors, they're looking for huge gains. They're looking for 100x gains from one of their portfolio companies to return an entire fund of money that they've raised. So they have to believe the company they're investing in, your own company, could return 100x, right? Yeah. So they invest 1 million, they might be looking for 100 million return. That's the thinking, that's the confidence they need to invest in a startup.
In a given amount of time? Do you reckon they decide as to how long it takes before they get that return?
Yeah, look, generally liquidity events in startups take a long time, right? I would say nothing earlier than 5 years through maybe some kind of an early exit, some kind of a merger or acquisition. Potentially 7, but if you're going to go the long haul, 10 years plus. So it's very illiquid type of investment overall. So that's why you need a high degree of confidence when you're putting money down, you're giving a check to someone, to a founder, that they're going to return that money.
You mentioned your own startup, the compliance and regulatory one, software. You want to help businesses, yeah? What was your target audience?
Correct.
Now, in the Australian arena, what type of business? Is it any type of business? Or small to medium? Or
yeah, good question. I'm looking at small to medium size SMEs overall. And again, heavily regulated industries. And I've worked with fintechs, those that have created fintech companies, and from day one they need to adhere to certain compliance requirements, so they need that kind of help. Others in the health space as well. Privacy, for example, is a huge thing for healthcare. Information security, privacy for certain companies that need to adhere to, not to get too technical, but ISO 27001, et cetera, et cetera. So wherever the industry is heavily regulated and someone's early stage but in business and they want to take that compliance headache off their shoulders, that's where I come in and help.
Is ISO an Australian standard or
international?
International standard.
Yeah, correct. International standard. That's there's ISO. There's all sorts of different standards around quality, information security, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another area of opportunity.
Is there any other compliance and regulatory softwares out there that you're competing against? Do you do research on something that's already well developed? And
absolutely.
You're trying to take market share a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, out in the Silicon Valley, there's a couple that are out there. I won't name names, but there's one probably 4 or 5 years in that's a unicorn now, specifically focused on information security compliance. It's called SOC 2 compliance, basically. So they've just identified a niche and grown through that. They're a global company now. There's others that are focused on, you might have heard of anti-money laundering. They've just focused on anti-money laundering as a compliance need for, again, people building fintechs and so on and so forth, and doing quite well as well. So, and then there's others that are what's commonly termed as GRC software, governance, risk and compliance software, for medium to larger firms to be able to understand their risks, controls, processes, etc., and put them all in one central place as well. So that industry is quite mature, but still opportunities out there. Yeah, absolutely. You got to do your competitor analysis, right? You can't just go off on a whim and just start building without understanding the competitive landscape as well.
Now, when you want to collaborate with investors, what are some of the ways you share your company? As in, are you passing shares to them as a way of a return to their
correct? It's equity
funding.
Yeah, it's debt versus equity, but generally speaking, in this industry, it's equity. General rule of thumb: every time you raise a round, every time you go and raise funding, it's about 15 to 18% of equity you're giving away to the investors. That might not be just one investor. It generally a group of investors come into a round. So if you're raising a seed round, and the seed rounds you might be raising between $1 to $3 million, and you might be putting a value. So if it's 15 to 18% or 20%, you're giving away your company, then it's the valuation is about $5 million. Your company you're valuing it, and you're raising that $1 million on that, and you're giving that 15% of equity away. So yeah, absolutely, you're giving shares of your company to investors, and they're what's in it for them is that 15%. They were hoping your company grows to maybe 50 million one day, so that's 10x or even beyond, they get a return on that 15% of shares that they own. Yep.
What's your strategy? Is it like to grow to a certain extent and then sell?
World domination. Nah.
World domination. I like that.
Yeah.
It's a big goal.
Yep. No, strategy definitely, continue to prove out the product as much as possible, but long term is, global markets, target global markets, specifically the UK, US, and some jurisdictions in Asia as well. So prove it out in Australia, and then go to the US quickly and the UK relatively quickly as well. And continue to grow, right? Startups are all about growth. If you're not growing, then you're probably not a startup.
So the aim is to have the businesses hopping onto this platform that you've developed. At the moment, what stage is it at? Like, is there further things you want to implement into this software?
You're always going to be implementing new features, right? Because you want to be continuing to get feedback from your customers. What do they really need? Prioritize, test it with other customers, make sure one customer is just telling you things that they don't really, that's not needed in the broader market. Test it out, and then implement those features. So where I'm at, the product's built, it's ready to use. I've got people using it already. There's people paying for it already. So done the hard yards. To be fair, that initial phase of having an idea, speaking to potential customers, building the first version, testing it, debugging it, working with developers to get it to a certain point overall. So I've done the hard yards, and now it's really more about that initial phase of growth. Yeah, pretty exciting, to be honest. Like it's exhilarating, like having put that work in, and there's now a product out there that's from your idea in your head,
And see the growth. How do you, see the importance of financial forecasting? Scratch that question. I'm going to ask something different. Explain specifically your software. How does businesses utilize it?
Yep, good question.
Yeah.
So say you're a business owner of, you're like an NDIS provider. NDI is a big topic at the moment, right? So anyone that has a disability, for example, there's a scheme here in Australia that you can get funding from. And then there's providers that provide those services to people with a disability. The government spends about $30 billion on the NDIS scheme. So it's a big deal. It's a big industry, if you want to call it that, right? But the government has implemented some strict compliance requirements and quality control requirements of those NDIS providers. So what I've done is, for that particular industry, identified what are all those key requirements for an NDIS provider, and then any NDIS provider that logs into the website, they select what type of industry am I part of, they select NDIS, and all the key requirements are populated. They don't need to go around looking around, websites and government sites and things like that, right? So automatically they know what they need to be mindful of. And then it's a matter of confirming, am I meeting this requirement? Am I meeting requirement A, B, C, D? So we've done the hard yards for them to identify what those are. For them, it's a matter of keeping that up to date and ensuring they've got the right processes, systems, controls to meet those requirements. So we've taken a lot of the work away for them, and we've taken a lot of work away where they don't need to hire a consultant to go and give them that advice. We've done that work for them. So that's one particular industry. It could be the same for, say, financial services or something like that as well. You select the industry, all the requirements are pre-populated for the particular business owner in that industry.
But you got these regulatory governing rules from government?
Yeah, correct. There's different governing bodies, right? So, so if it's privacy, it's the Australian Privacy Commissioner. If it's anti-money laundering, it's called AUSTRAC. If it's consumer requirements, it's ASIC. If it's banking requirements, it's APRA. So there's all these government organizations and bodies and agencies that have their particular requirements. And if you're a participant in that particular industry governed by that agency, then you need to meet those requirements. In a jurisdiction like Australia, if you don't meet those requirements, you could be in for some heavy penalties, and potentially be deregistered as well. So you don't want to muck around in Australia when it comes to that, and other first world countries. To be honest, Singapore is the same, the UK is the same, America's the same, Canada, etc. So you can't escape legislative requirements as a business owner in these types of industries.
Does that mean when you reach out to the UK and the American market, the standards might overlap, or
Good question.
Yeah, what comes out on top?
Good question. So it depends which.
Depends what business, huh?
Depends on what business. Depends what market you're operating in. So if you're running a global company, you have a business operating in Australia, you have a business operating in UK and US.
Yeah.
All those jurisdictions will have different requirements, right?
Yeah.
So we will provide requirements per jurisdiction.
Per
geography.
jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
And can the audience understand this as a database? Like, you are literally saying,
Yep.
hop onto this software, and the software tells you
Yep.
what you are governed by per jurisdiction.
Absolutely. You don't have to be a compliance expert. You don't have to hire a consultant. All you have to do is select which industry you're part of. We provide you with all the key requirements. So that's where the magic is, to be fair. And all you have to do is tick and bash, yes or no, and you'll have that confidence you're running a compliant business.
Yep.
Overall.
And so your software covers all industries? So
No, not all. Not all. We've selected a special few that are heavily regulated. That matters the most. We're not saying all.
Yes.
Eventually, absolutely, we'll try and keep adding to the industry list overall.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly at this point, we're looking after areas that really matter. Some industries just aren't governed that well, right? Like cleaning, for example. There's not a lot of rules around cleaning, is there? Really, it's the customer that determines the standard, right? Counselling is an interesting one as well. There's no real overarching governing principles as well. So what I'm saying is that certain industries do not have those compliance requirements overall. So look, it's one of those topics that probably not a sexy topic, right? Like, I'll be straight up with the audience. It's not a sexy topic, but you cannot escape it if you're a business owner in a lot of these industries. So sometimes the unsexy businesses are the ones that win because you can't, it's not going away. Do you know what I mean? It's if anything, it's increasing.
Yep.
The magic is, how do you bring technology, data, AI into such a boring industry like this and make it really easy for the end user, for the businesses at the end of the day. So I'm trying to make something unsexy sexy, basically.
It's interesting because you mentioned at the health space, like for example in Australia, the NDIS, the disability schemes. So that's not even a product, it's a service. Do you have spaces where it's a product, like companies that sell products globally?
Yep. Well, financial services, right? That's a pretty good example, right? If you're selling a personal loan, that's a product, and rightly, the Australian regulators want to make sure the consumers of that product, a personal loan, aren't ripped off by rogue people that are selling those products, right? So those industries are heavily regulated.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So some are product based, others are service based.
Because financial planners literally is receiving money, funding from people, and the people maybe just average Australians with their savings, trying to maybe have a portfolio that increases. I can understand that there's a lot of pressure if it's not governed. And if advice is not the correct advice that these financial planners are giving. Now, when you like, for example, go out there and explain to businesses what your software is all about, do you give like a PDS? Like, is there a brochure that you hand out? Like,
Yeah.
or is it
Absolutely.
you
Look,
personally go into a meeting and say,
yeah,
let me run this software through with you?
correct. That's what I wanted to say, right? So, look, we do have brochures, etc., but what really matters is demos. Well, so what I'm building, what's called a SaaS product, software as a service product, and it's a B2B type of business, a business to business type of product I'm building. And in this space, what really matters is, firstly, relationship building and sales. And the relationship building is the part that you're really trying to understand your customer, right? You're not really trying to sell something. You're really trying to understand what their business is and how you can help at the end of the day. If you can't help, then that's where it kind of ends, right? Or you try and connect them with something else overall. But if you can, what matters is a demo. Demo of the software itself. How does it work? Run them through it. That's when the aha moment happens. Brochure is probably not enough, to be fair. I mean, you could send a cool email explaining some of the key points, but that's really the key. One of the key acquisition points, selling points overall. Yeah.
Do you personally do the demos yourself, or do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I personally do the demos. I do have a small team at the moment that we're engaging our end users at the moment. But as the founder, you got to be hands on. You got to be hands on. You can't outsource stuff early days, right? You are the business in a lot of ways. So, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it, right? Like I said, I'm kind of an expert in that field as well. So, it's good.
How did your idea come? The initial idea of a compliance and regulation software.
Yeah, it came because I've worked in banks in the past, and banks are heavily regulated as well. But there's a lot of resources, tools, and support and people to throw at. But some of the small business owners, they're also operating regulated industries, but they don't have the tools, resources, and the expertise. I wanted to make it really easy for them, just as the large organisations do, to make it easy to understand their compliance requirements as well. So I really wanted to democratise, compliance overall and make it super simple. Yeah, take one headache away, and they can just focus on the business, right? Like that's the thing.
You mentioned earlier on that you do have to understand that the market needs what you're developing. At which point do you realise that the market needs what you're developing?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, for every founder, that's the $1 million question. It's how does the
how do you
market respond to it? So only one way. You gotta do customer interviews. You have to do customer interviews, and don't throw your product out there. You got to start with, tell me about your problem, and you firstly identify what the customer persona you're going after. You're not just talking to anyone. You're probably going to be talking to maybe a founder in a health tech company or something like that. Tell me about your problems that were into this space. That's how you kind of work through that. And through that interview process, you understand what their pain points are and see if the product you've built meets their pain point. Or you need to go and tweak your product. At the end of the day, keep tweaking. It's an iterative process. Continue to take feedback, apply, update, go and show it, take feedback, and continue to iterate. That's the loop. And the moment you stop, that is the moment you stop evolving.
So problems are unique to that industry. So every industry comes to you with a different set of problems.
Oh yeah, that is correct, right? And you can't listen to all your customers too, right? Then you'll just be running around all over the place trying to build all sorts of features for 50 different types of end users, and you can't do that. You've got to have a narrow focus early on, really build some depth. And yeah, it's a really good point. Sometimes you just can't do everything your customer asks you to do. You got to prioritize and learn when to say no sometimes as well, or not now.
How do you choose when the customer says, "I'd like to have these features," but the software developing team says,
Too
"It'll
hard.
cost you," like is
Yeah.
money is funding always priority in assessing
Yep.
what's feasible?
Now we're
what's
getting into product
achievable?
development world a little bit, to be fair, but yeah, absolutely. And this is how a good product roadmap is required, right? A customer might have a fantastic ask or a need or a feature request, but it could be not something that you build as part of your next product release, right? It could be part of your 2-year product roadmap that you build in 18 months' time and release it into the market. So, yeah, really important to get that feedback, prioritize, and put it in your product roadmap overall, and align your product roadmap with your development team and their resources, their throughput, plus the funding side of things as well. So probably another topic for another day because yeah, product development is a totally different discipline, but it's all intertwined with building a startup at the end of the day.
What are some of the strategies for managing financial risks in a startup?
Financial risks. Don't go crazy on marketing early on. That's probably the number one thing I would say. Again, validate your product with your initial customers. Make sure you're solving a real problem before you start throwing money away at Google ads, Facebook ads, and things like that. Really focus on relationships, sales. Founder-led sales is the term. I would say that's probably the number one thing. The second thing I would say is perhaps don't go and raise a bunch of money early on and give all your equity away, right? Because there's one side to it, right? Would you want 5% of $100 million company, or would you want 100% of a $5 million company? Do you know where I'm coming from? Because your net worth is still 5 mil.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, so it depends what you're looking for, right? And if you give all your equity away, you're probably not going to have company control and decision rights and so forth as well.
I was just going to say that it depends. Like if it allows you to make decisions within the company for growth.
Exactly.
I'll probably be looking at that a little bit more.
Yeah, as the founder, you'd want to maintain that as much as possible, as long as possible, because once you lose control of the board, then you're kind of in the lap of the board, right?
Yeah.
And funny things have happened, right, over the history of startups. You've seen people like Steve Jobs get kicked out from the company he created. Obviously, he came back to save the day in the 90s. Travis Kalanick, one of my people I've looked up to. I know probably a little bit controversial, but he grew Uber to a multi-billion-dollar company, but he got kicked out of the board as well, as the founder, I should say, by the board. So, big decisions as you mature.
It's pretty cutthroat.
Absolutely. But it's a nice problem to have, right? That means you're building something valuable.
Yeah. Maybe you see it as you gave it a perspective. The board may disagree, that they want to take the company a different direction.
Absolutely.
You just understand it as, at this point, we cannot agree.
Correct. And if everyone's invested, the investors have put their money in, now the company's Series C or Series D worth, I don't know, 75, 100 million, $500 million, it's a valuable baby you've raised, right? Those decision makings, the decision making is very, very important, so you can understand how, people disagree and go their own ways, right? Founders and co-founders, board of directors, key hires, etc., etc.
You mentioned earlier on about angel investing. Can you share a little bit about that, your experiences with that?
Yeah, no, good one. I think it's probably a good one to finish up on the other side of my perspective as an investor. So I have recently started angel investing. So just a quick snapshot for those that might not have heard of it too much. It's one of those, I suppose, higher risk investment strategies overall. So you're basically investing in these early stage, potentially high growth companies, and you're putting your money into like an early stage funding round, like a seed round overall. as an angel, you're determined to be a sophisticated investor. Here in Australia, you need to get that certification before you go down that path. But you're not a venture capitalist, right? So it's not as structured and formal overall. So you're joining these syndicates that are, other sophisticated investors. They could be ex-founders, got a little bit of money, or they've inherited money. Who knows where they made their money from, and they want to multiply that at the end of the day. And for them, they get this the deal flow coming through. So people like me that building companies, other people building companies coming in and pitching to them, saying, "Hey, I'm onto a fantastic thing. You should invest in me for X, Y, and Z reasons. We're going to return X amount in 5 years' time." And depending on your story and I guess your traction, your data, and your team, an angel investor with other angels will come in and invest. And you're not investing a whole lot of money at this stage. You're not cutting like a check of $1 million. It's a much less than that, but it's still high risk. It's not like you're investing in the ASX 200 or anything like that, right? So you got to be prepared to have a few losses, but hopefully you do your due diligence. And the deal flow is high quality to the point that eventually you will return your money, and hopefully you return your money 20x, 50x. You never know, right? So I'm in that space now too, because I've kind of understand the founder's journey and can see, I guess, good potential startups with good exit opportunities in the future. So as an investment class, I encourage everyone to look into it if you're willing to take a punt.
When you make your first set of revenue, do you then reinvest it back into the software?
Yes. Short answer is yes. Yeah, absolutely. You're investing everything into it, right? I mean, it's quite rare you're going to be profitable at the start. You're more focused on growth and product development. Growth, product development at the end of the day. And then, you might want to throw some money into marketing as well.
What advice would you give to someone considering starting their own business?
Yeah, look, firstly, I think entrepreneurship is really pivotal to any country, right? Any advanced country. At the end of the day, we need more people taking a punt, taking a risk, and creating businesses and creating breakthrough businesses and disrupting existing businesses, etc. And really importantly, creating jobs as well at the end of the day. So I think first is, if you've got a great idea, definitely test it out in the market. Don't quit your job straight away is probably the first piece of advice. But if you think you have a great idea, then speak to your end customers that you think will be your end customer. Get some information and validate that thought process. Build version 1 of the product. These days you can really build something without not a lot of money overall. Lots of easy to use no-code tools that you can use. Just look up no-code and you'll see a whole bunch of things that's available to build easy to use websites. Get out there and have a go is the main message at the end of the day, because there's huge rewards at the end of it. And by that I mean financial rewards for sure, personal growth opportunities. It's like doing 10 MBAs all in the one time, right? Minimum overall. And at the end of it, if it's not a successful exit, you're going to be walking away with so many different skills and experiences that will propel your next career anyway. So that's the main message for me, that have a go, because I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot through the startup world myself. So look, thanks for the opportunity again. Good to be back on the podcast.
Thank you for your time.
And great work, and speak soon.